Good morning.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Tipsy Casting. I'm Jess, and this is my co-host, Jen. Thank you all for tuning in again this week. We are excited to welcome actor and fellow podcaster Mike Elder to Tipsy Casting. Mike Fox Elder is a Los Angeles-based actor originally from Minnesota. You may be seeing him in a commercial or two, but probably didn't realize it. He once donned a pigeon suit for vitamin water. He conspired with a couple of dogs and used a drone to take off with a couple of Togo subs. And he buzzed his head for Dollar Shave Club.
He also hosts the Los Angeles podcast where he interviews entertainment professionals about navigating show business. He would be the first to say he's not always certain how or when his big break will come along, but just last week, a bird flew into his kitchen, so he's got that going for him at least.
Now grab a cocktail
Or a mocktail.
and enjoy. Hello, Mike. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Long-time listener. First-time caller.
Well, we're excited to have you on. The tables have turned now. The last time I was in person with you, I was a guest on your show.
That is correct.
Los
Angeles. You were on my podcast many years ago. It's delightful.
Yes, we were drinking then as well. So this is not, we're no strangers to drinking together. So this is nice.
Yeah, I feel like I used to drink with my guests. I don't know if this is the same for you guys. I used to drink with my guests to sort of relax them a little bit and make it feel more casual. And I feel like it helped. I don't know if you guys have felt the same way.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think so.
And I think you can tell even just like listening in the episodes, like the longer the episode goes on, the more chill it gets because you're getting more and more drunk.
Yep, absolutely, for sure.
This is
So it's
true.
been fun.
Well, yeah. So like, first of all, we do our thing. What are you drinking, Mr. Elder?
Okay, so it is Sunday. To remove the movie magic, it is Sunday morning when we're recording this. So I'm doing the classic Sunday brunch. I'm double fisting. I have a Bloody Mary I mixed up,
Oh.
as well as an Americano coffee I made. So I got
Love
a
it.
2-for-1 right now. So I'm gonna have to pee before the end of this thing, probably.
I love it. Nobody's had a Bloody Mary yet on our show yet. So
I actually got very close to making that, maybe not the Americano, but the Bloody Mary this morning. And then I realized I had no Clamato or whatever it is to mix it with. So that's a big part.
That's a key part of a Bloody Mary.
But I was so in the mood. So it was a disappointment this morning when I realized it's not
You
there.
could have made a Bloody Mary sans Bloody Mary juice and just had a shot of Tito's.
Vodka and olives, basically. So a martini.
A Bloody Mary feels like the Sunday morning drink. You know what I mean? I go to a brunch in Los Feliz or wherever, and I just get a coffee and a Bloody and a breakfast burrito, and that's California, I feel like.
yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that describes LA to a T.
Exactly.
With avocado, obviously.
Yes.
What are you guys drinking?
I'm at my parents' house in Colorado, and so I'm at the mercy of what was ever in their bar. And I have a pale ale, a Mirror Pond pale ale beer, it was either that or Coors Light because my family only drinks Coors Light, and this must have been left over from something, and I refuse to drink Coors Light because it's like water to me.
I love that.
What about you,
That's
Jess?
funny. I needed to go to the store, clearly. I am very low on all of the things. So I stuck in the freezer real fast a bottle of rosé because it was literally at the very back of all of my half empty bottles. So it's a rosé morning on a Sunday morning for me.
Nice. Rosé all day, babe.
Mm-hmm. Another
Rosé all
California
day, every day.
Yes.
That's my motto.
Yes. So, I mean, we're super jazzed to have you on because we haven't really had your perspective on the show. Also being, I guess, sort of like in the, how do I say this? Not necessarily focused on Strike Talk, but Strike Talk and all other things. But I want to hear about your start. I know you came up sort of in the improv world.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, by the way, because I do feel like I love how you guys start your podcast every week with calling yourselves run-of-the-mill casting directors, right? Because people assume you have 10 shows, you're working on 6 sitcoms and 3 movies. Actors are the same way, right? Like, I'm auditioning regularly. I don't book anything, but that doesn't mean I'm not over here working and auditioning and taking classes and doing podcasts and everything. So I don't think a lot of podcasts, myself included, highlight sort of the run-of-the-mill actor, casting director. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for having me from that perspective. How I got started is a little different, right? So in college, I was the mascot at the University of Minnesota. It's a big Division I school, a big football program. I stumbled into this role as the mascot, and I just loved it, right? I was performing for huge crowds of fans at football games, at hockey games. Granted, I wasn't talking much, but I was performing. Oftentimes, people are just staring at you. They're not watching the game. If you're good at mascotting, you're distracting the fans, and they're having fun with you, unless, of course, the game is close and you want to focus on the game. But oftentimes at Minnesota, the games were not close, and the mascot was the best part about it, right? So I just really got addicted to sort of that adrenaline of performing, right? And after I graduated college, I was working in a cubicle. I was hating my life, and I started taking improv classes in Minnesota, started taking acting classes, started performing in Minnesota, and then eventually I was like, I got to move to LA. So that's sort of the short form origin of how I got started.
So what did you major in then, if you didn't major in performance of any sort?
Right. Thank you for asking. I majored in civil engineering, actually, sort of the complete opposite of performance, right? And it's funny, right? I feel like a lot of actors, there's, from all my interviews on my podcast, there's sort of that conservatory route, but then there's sort of I'm curious about this creative side, right? I'm focused on something else over here, but I dabble, and sort of I'm in obviously the latter category.
Mm-hmm.
Where I grew up in Minnesota, I grew up in, flyover country, right? So like, my high school had the sports budget through the roof, and they had the tiniest theater I've ever seen. I didn't even know if we had a drama department, to be honest with you. It was never in my purview. Hollywood was such a weird place. So even though I was a class clown and I was always sort of performing for my friends, it never even occurred to me that this was an option or something I could pursue.
So how long have you been in LA then?
I've been in LA almost 11 years now.
Wow,
so basically, I was in Minnesota doing I don't know if you know the Guthrie Theater. That's a big theater there. I was taking classes there. I was doing small theater around town in suburbs or wherever they would put me, which was a lot of places. There's not a ton of actors. So I booked a lot of local theater. But we also had a ton of Fortune 500 companies like Best Buy and Target are based there. And I guess probably there was some clause when they cast commercials, they would have to cast locally some portion of it. But all the actors I was around were like, did you book it? Did you book it? And nobody booked it. It was always somebody from LA. And so I was like, well, it seems like I've got to be in LA. So I moved to LA 11 years ago. And as Jen alluded to, or Jessica alluded to, I started doing a lot of improv because that's just sort of where I knew to go. And that's where I met all my friends. And that's where my communities come from. I basically just did every single improv theater out here. I interned at every single one. I just tried to meet a lot of people. And that sort of was the genesis of my podcast, too. I just was meeting all these people, and I was like, these are interesting people. I'd love to talk to them.
And where did you come up with the name Box Angeles?
Oh, boy, I just had a huge debate about this. If I have one regret in my life, it is the name of my podcast. It confuses everybody. It doesn't make any sense. It's a multi-layered callback pun that makes no... My nickname is Box. Everyone called me Box in Minnesota, so I wanted to put my name in the title. And then there was a pun with Los Angeles, so it's Box Angeles. But every time I tell people the name of it, they're like, what? It doesn't make any sense. In retrospect, I wish you had Aubrey Moore on last week or a week ago. I don't know when this is coming up.
Last week.
And she named it Aubrey Helps Actors. Genius. It's right on the nose. You guys tipsy casting. You drink booze and talk about casting. I wish I named it Mike Talks About Los Angeles and Hollywood and acting and entertainment. It's so on the nose, I think, is so much better. But the name is the bane of my existence at this point, I think.
But now we know that where at least the box part comes from.
Right. But do I have time to tell every single person that when they ask me? No. And I would rather not. And I'm getting kind of annoyed. The biggest regret of my life, I'll tell you what.
Oh, my goodness. So sort of stepping back to your origin story of Los Angeles, at least, when you came here, did you know anybody or you just sort of popped in and started building?
Like two people, right? So I knew a friend's ex-girlfriend was basically it. And I stayed at her place the first night I got here. I was like, I got to find an apartment. I don't want to be crashing at somebody's house. I literally went on Craigslist the moment I got here, found an apartment, moved in. That was my old place you were at, Jessica. And I lived there for like the first 10 years because it was so cheap. And I immediately was like, I got to be doing something. So I started signing up for improv classes, and then I was sort of off and running.
Nice. And then did you get your agent off those classes, or how did you sign with someone?
Yeah. So reps are weird, right? Like it seemed really easy to get a commercial rep. The first one I had, I got through basically one of my improv instructors did sort of casting workshops, like I'm sure you guys have done. And we would just do a scene for casting, and I got a commercial rep through that. They were okay. My newest commercial rep, who I love, his name's Tim O'Shea. He's a really great worker, hustler. He was a referral from another improviser. He just loves improvisers. He's fantastic. And then my TV agent I got 3 or 4 years ago, he was a fan of the podcast, did the podcast. I met with him, and then he started repping me theatrically. He sort of hip pocketed me. He's mostly a commercial guy, but he now is venturing into theatrical. So I was sort of one of his first forays into that, and I've been with him ever since. My manager was a cold email. My voiceover agent was somebody that loved the podcast as well and did the podcast, and then wanted to rep me commercially. But I was loyal to my commercial agent, so she said, "How about I just take you on voiceover?" So that's sort of how that happened.
Amazing! You really hit the gamut there for everything.
I
Whenever you ask from actors, everyone's always like, "How do you get an agent?" And I'm like, "You got to, one or the other. This is like, I got this one this way, this one this."
I have a whole squad of team for very little credits. It's very fascinating. But I will tell you this, if any actors are listening, I think the best ways to do referrals, without a doubt, I'm sure you guys feel the same way. Somebody vouching for you is so much better than just cold emailing. And yeah, I got my manager cold emailing, but they're very small and boutique, so I don't think it was a huge get by any means. But referral, I think, is the key to any of that sort of outreach, just because somebody in your corner. There's a lot of weirdos out here. You guys know that. I know that. There's a lot of weirdos. So just sort of getting through that level, that first gate, I think is helpful to have a referral.
Yeah, I think also there's another podcast also that with actors who engage with either casting directors or other professionals in the industry, and I think it's the most brilliant thing because it's I found yours, and then was it Placing Faces was another specifically casting one, and I was like, that is so smart for an actor to do a podcast that centers around the people that hold the power in some capacity. I mean, clearly it's provided a lot of opportunities to you over the years that you've been doing this.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So that's something I wish I had done sooner. I had Dorian Frankel on the podcast, the legendary casting director. For those that don't know, she casts all sorts of huge shows, comedy and drama. I had her on very early on. I started the podcast, I think, the first year I moved here, or a year after I moved here. And randomly I emailed her, I think because I was watching Baskets at the time, and I was like, oh, that'd be cool to talk to the person that cast Baskets. I love the show. She said yes and did it. And then I didn't interview any casting people for a very long time. And I got to the point where I was auditioning for this stuff, right? But not as much as I would like to. And I was like, you know what? What's a better way to get in front of casting people than have them come to me, get a 1-hour general where I show them who I am, make them laugh, have a beer with them, chit chat, and just show them I'm here and I'm available and willing. And I think it's been very helpful in the sense that I've been seen and people know me. I don't think I've gotten as many auditions as you would think from it, but right before the SAG strike, a week or two, I got a short film audition from none other than Dorian Frankel. And that was the first time I've ever gone in for Dorian. And it was 8 years later. And I'm like, oh, I'm planting these little seeds. And it's fun to sort of see them pop up.
Yeah,
and
it's definitely the long game. I mean, if anything, not just the podcast, but just in general, I feel like that's the thing that nobody really thinks about. There's this expectation of, oh, it's got to happen immediately. But the relationship between actors and casting directors is a long-term relationship.
Yeah, I agree. And there's something to the idea of delayed gratification, right? It's fun to know that things come back around years later and you don't have to have results right away, right?
Yeah. Even on our side of it, I've noticed that people I've worked for years ago, even in us trying to reach out to guests for our podcast, I'm like, oh gosh, I don't think this person's going to remember. It's been 8 years since I've worked with her. And then I'll reach out and she's like, of course I remember, you were a great part of the casting process. Yeah, of course we'll come out. It's kind of a little bit of a gratification of oh, I do matter a little bit. I think people forget me as soon as I leave, and at least they do remember.
Well, I don't want to gas you up, Jen, but I've never met you and I feel like I know you. You just have a very warm sensibility about you.
Oh, thank you.
I think people recognize that probably.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I've gotten that quite a bit, especially in teaching classes and stuff. Everyone's like, most casting directors come in a bit harsh and cold. And I was like, I just I've never really bought into the whole Hollywood hype of it all. Like, I'm not a sceney person, and I just really do it because I love it. So I think that maybe comes across a little bit more too than some other people who are just like there to get the notice or
Yeah,
beyond
absolutely.
being
I
somebody
agree. I'm the
cool.
same way, right? Like I came here because I liked making people laugh, right? And like
Hmm.
I'm just waiting. I'm just patiently waiting, and I think it's gonna happen at some point.
Do you do stand up too?
I've done stand up. I talk about this a lot. I'm not a great writer. I studied civil engineering, right? So I'm sort of a math brain. So I'm not good at writing. I can't. I've started screenplays. I have a screenplay that's done, but like at the same time, I'm not good at sort of pulling things apart, and like I'm very like a 1+1 = 2. Like I was at the Broad yesterday. That's why I mentioned the Broad. And I was looking at these Basquiat paintings, and like he's got a head, and then there's like a square on the head, and I'm like, whose brain thinks of putting a square in a head? That's not how a head goes. So this is a weird way to say it, very pragmatic. But I just don't write well. So I think I perform stand up well, but I'm not good at the writing joke process. That was a shorter answer.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's the improv. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's mostly improv. It's easier because you can do it off the cuff. Same with podcasts, right? You don't have to prepare anything. You can just sort of do it off the cuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's your like ideal? Like if you could choose, I love asking actors this question. Like if you could choose your dream path in acting life, what would that look like? And like, or who would you kind of mold it after?
I mean, my dream path would be something like a Zach Galifianakis, right? Like as far, not stand-up wise, but as far as his acting career, I think I have a lot of the same sensibility as him in the sense that when he shows up on screen, people tend to just laugh. And I know this is going to sound very conceited, so this is conceited corner on Tipsy Casting. I think I come into a room and I sort of just make people laugh. Just sort of my aura and my presence. It's just sort of I'm a bigger dude, but I'm kind of goofy, and I'm not at all intimidating, but I am a bigger dude. And so I think I just get that sort of laugh. And when Galifianakis comes on screen, you're like, wow, this guy's weird. He's funny. And so I love how he sort of started in indies and then done huge movies, and he does like a weird sitcom at the same time, or a weird FX show at the same time. And so I love something like that. But I do think the dream would be, in Always Sunny or some show, some FX comedy where you have a set schedule and you just do that for 8 seasons. I think that would be really great.
I'd like to cast one of those too. That sounds fun.
Hey, he's available. Jessica Sherman, you guys.
8 seasons of TV. I'm here for it.
Man.
I mean, but to that point, right? Like that is hard, right? And so somebody who I really admire, who is not that, right, is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, Jason Mantzoukas.
Yeah.
Jason Mantzoukas is the exact same thing, but he's not a movie star like Galifianakis, right? Mantzoukas' career, I think, is so enviable in the sense that he's not an A-lister. He's what, maybe a C-lister, I don't know. But he comes on at every single TV show you've ever seen. He's been on every single one.
Yeah.
He comes in for a day, does his thing as a guest star, and he's out. Like that is such an enviable career, I think. He just does his thing. He's sort of like, he's like the relief pitcher that comes in the 9th inning, does his thing, and is out. I think his career is so impressive. And he's technically a working actor, right? Like he's not making $10 million a movie. He's doing his SAG day rate thing, and
I don't think he's doing that anymore.
Well, I know.
Yeah.
I'll tell you from personal experience, right? He's a very well-paid actor.
Yes.
Yes.
To be fair, I loved one of my favorite shows to this day, comedy-wise, is The League. Because I was when I lived in the States, I was huge into fantasy football, and somebody had turned me on to that show, and I was like, these guys are geniuses. And that was when I first got introduced to Mantzoukas. And then even like, it was so crazy because on the plane flying over here, I watched How to Be Single, and which is one of my favorite movies. And I own it. That's how much I love it. And I forgot that he's the one who ends up marrying Alison Brie. And you're like, he comes on. I was like, oh my God, I forgot he's totally in this. Like him and Jake Lacy are two of my favorite, like kind of like fly under the radar comedians, but like they do really well.
Yeah. And they do everything.
Yeah.
Because you know exactly what you're going to get with them, right? I don't know why actors hate typecasting, because I would kill to be typecast for any casting directors that are listening. But like, what we all are types. What's wrong with that? And he comes in and does his thing. He hits it out of the park, and then he's gone. He doesn't have the stress of like making sure the ratings on the shows are good. He doesn't have the stress of like the day-to-day stuff. He just comes in, does his thing, and he's out. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah. I love his podcast. I don't know. Have you guys ever listened to How Did This Get Made with him and Paul Scheer and June Diane Raphael? Oh, it's hilarious.
I didn't realize he was on it too.
Oh my God, he's hilarious. I'll be walking around London and I'll just be on the middle of the street just laughing. I'm like, people think I'm crazy, but it's just so funny. Like, and I saw that one of my favorite episodes of theirs is the Meg. They did the Meg, and now the Meg 2 just came out. I'm like, please go and do it. Please go and do it. I'm dying to like, listen to that.
That's
one of my
funny.
favorite out there.
Yeah, it's a good podcast. It's kind of a hot mess at times, but that's beautiful at the same time.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure they're making pretty good money off of it too, considering supplement that little laughter rate.
Yeah, to make money off a podcast. Can you guys imagine? Wow.
Ugh, in our dreams. One day we have dreams of doing that.
Yeah. I'd like to consider us a work in progress. Thank you very much.
Very nascent. I think you guys will be turning a profit here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Oh. From your mouth.
I know. It's like, do you know something we don't know?
Did you send somebody our way? What happened?
You're gonna get the Box Angeles bump. Now that I was on here, everyone's gonna listen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I believe it. You've had some really fun people on your podcast. Like, I think you get a little bit of everything. I think the most notable casting director for me was Felicia Pisano.
Oh yeah, Felicia was great.
And that was years. I think that was right before I went on, and she was not intentionally hysterical, but I think her path was so unconventional. Like, she had cast porn for a while there, like all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
What?
She is wild in the best possible way.
Yeah, all of you guys have had very unique paths, right? Like, I kind of assumed you all were creatives and wanted to act, but that's definitely not the case at all. It's it's fun to see. It's sort of like my journey, right? Civil engineering, and then, hey, let's try it. I think a lot of casting people are like that, where it's sort of, I don't want to say you guys are an afterthought, but like in the first,
you can say it's fine.
Yeah, I've listened. It sounds like you guys are, and I feel bad about that. It's like in the pilot, though, of The Office, Jenna Fisher's like, no little girl dreams of being a receptionist. I'm not sure anyone's dreaming of being a casting director necessarily, but it is so pivotal, and it's such a cool thing you guys get to do. I have a time think I'd be a great casting director just because I feel like you're taking puzzle pieces and fitting them together, and I know that's a simplified version of it, especially after listening to this. You guys do all that pre-work and stuff, which is fascinating, by the way. You guys need to talk more about that and say it louder, because I don't think anybody realizes all the work you guys do just to get a job, which is the same thing we do, and it's more of the same reason why we're all in the same boat together, and we should be supporting each other more.
Yeah. You know, what's so funny is like, I literally just did this the other week where a production company I worked with a lot in the States before I moved is open an international office, and their international guy lives in Europe, not in the UK, but he was visiting, and he was like, let's go get lunch. And I was like, sure, great. And I'm thinking it's just gonna be like a catch up lunch. And he's like, so tell me who you like over here. And I was like, almost that moment of like, oh shit, what am I going to say? And then I was like, wait, you know what you're talking about. And then I started rattling off like all these actors I had met recently in the UK who I think are rising stars and all this stuff and who I like. And he's like, oh wow, you actually do know. Like, he's like, not that I was testing you, but like, it's nice to know that you, and I was like, do you know how long it's taken me months to get like even that like baseline of gut reaction of like, if somebody asks you, you have to know at the drop of a hat who you like. And they can't be Meryl Streep. They have to be somebody who's really cool and niche, and then explain, like, even I had to go in my head and be like, and they're on this show in the UK, and then they're on this show in the US, and I have to know their resumes and who reps them, like all at the drop of a hat. And it's a tool that comes in useful in that situation because it makes you look good. But again, I didn't even prep for that. And I was like, if I would have known, I would have come up with like a really cool, like even more niche list that's just not like in deer in the headlights, like, this is who I know.
But that recall is real, right? Like, you have to have an encyclopedic knowledge of all of these actors, and you guys don't have the benefit of like having an office where you can be like, hey, Jessica, who was that 25-year-old African-American woman that was in that thing that we really liked, that we want, you know what I mean? You two as independent casting directors, it's all on you guys sort of, right? To sort of make your encyclopedia your Rolodex of all these categories.
Yeah, I think it's also like it's also how we sort those names in our heads, because for me, when I'm watching TV, I literally have my phone and I have IMDb Pro up, so I am anytime I see an interesting face or somebody that
Cool.
gave a great performance that I just didn't know before, whether they're international actors or US based, whatever it is, like I either track them or I add them to a list so that I can then find them later. So I think it's like it's that space that we're always working, and then we're trying to find where to sort them into our own sort of databases.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of work.
Not to plug IMDb Pro or anything, but that's basically.
No, but I mean, I will say, it's really cool too, is like being in the UK, they have Spotlight, which is their version of Breakdown. And it's so easy to like go in as a new person and just like tool around and be like, who's this person? Who's this person? Let me see like who reps, from this agency that I like. And that has been a huge tool for me too in switching countries, and not only now having to know all my US pool, but also an entire another country's pool of actors. It's been just like an amazing tool. So,
but they're throughout Europe too. It's not just in the UK.
Yeah.
So it's like you have a really expansive database of just like educating yourself of who's out there.
Yeah. They because I did two very small budget movies earlier this year. That one was out of Paris, and the other one was like in between Venice and Nice. And it was like, so they and it was very low budget, so they clearly wanted local actors. And it's like, okay, they can actually, Spotlight's a little bit better than Breakdown in my opinion of this. Like they actually mark like where you can be locals from and every dialect. Like it's like very easy to scroll through and find information, where I feel like Breakdown, sometimes you have to kind of like click around or look on somebody's resume. And, even and in LA, it's kind of funny because it's the joke that's like everyone can ride a horse until they have to. And so then it's like,
ride one, that's your casting.
Done, you're hired.
Oh crap. Google's horse lessons.
Yes. Quick, run up to Malibu Ranch and learn now. But no, they like really list out like every little thing that people can do, and even it's a great system. I'm a big fan. So
yeah. Speaking of the horse situation, I remember we took a general with Richard Madden, and it was when we were casting The Force Awakens, but we didn't have material yet to actually audition people, so we were just taking general meetings. And he was talking about his experience getting Game of Thrones, that he was saying that like he straight up lied when they asked him if he knew how to ride a horse. He had never been on a horse in his life, and then he said that after he got the call back, he started learning how to ride a horse. Like, those are very dangerous things to lie about, because you could get really injured if it goes wrong.
So did he tell them like even after he got the part? Like then he was like, hey, really, I can't really, but I'll go take lessons? Or did he just like fake it all the way until like day one?
He faked it until he started to have to shoot. Like, not faked it, but like he started learning as soon as it became legitimate. Wow. And then I think eventually he told them that, otherwise I just outed you. Sorry, Richard Madden. But I mean, he's fine. He's busy doing Citadel. No one's worried about him. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, Mike. So tell us some great audition stories, since you're on the other side. We always love the other side. What have been some of your craziest like casting stories, or like have you ever been put into unique situations auditioning?
I was talking to somebody last week about this. I thought it was way longer than it was, but I think it was earlier this year, maybe January or February. I was on a Zoom audition for a commercial. This is so depressing. Buckle in. And we were put in waiting rooms, and I was with a girl who was going to be my scene partner. And I think I'm unique in this. I like to leave my camera on while I'm waiting for an audition, because I just think it's more realistic, and we're paying attention. I'm showing I'm ready and all this. This young lady had her camera off, and she thought she was muted.
Oh no.
And her dad or somebody came in and said, "Who's this idiot talking to me, pointing to me on the screen?" And I hate confrontation. It's partly why I'm a bad writer. I don't write good confrontation because I hate it. And I was like, oh, and I'm looking down, and she's like, "Yeah, he's just some idiot I'm casting with." And I'm just like, what is happening? And they just sort of dumped on me for a little bit, solely based on look, right? And then I think then I just chimed up and I was like, you're not muted. And she's like, oh, sorry, I'm feeding the baby. And like panic and muted herself. And I was like, feeding the baby, interesting lie. But it was such a weird, and it was so disheartening because it was like, as a fellow actor, I was about to go in this scene with her. Why would you want to just start that energy like that before we do this, right? Not to mention we're sitting in a weight room and it's awkward, but like just that energy, we're all in this. We don't want to be here. We don't want to be waiting. We want to have the part. We want to work together. And it was just such a bummer to have that happen. She dropped out of the audition like 20 minutes later, and I was like, wow, that's hilarious. And she just left. But it was such a bummer situation. It's never happened to me, and I know it happened to the guy off the White Lotus with the director
Gage.
that one time.
It was literally the first person I thought.
Yeah, and I was like, that makes sense, right? Sort of. That's the other side of it. That's the director. But like to have that happen with your fellow actors, I'm just like, what? This is hard enough. Why would you want to put that out there? I think actors are very self-sabotaging, and it really disappoints me because I wish the ones that would just get out of the way and not clog up the things. But like, that's just such a bad vibe to have going into an audition. And that was, I couldn't believe it. That it took me 10 years for that to happen, and I'm glad it took that long, but I hope it doesn't happen again because it was very disheartening.
Oh, that's horrible. What is your experience been like? Have you found more personal success in the Zoom/self-tape environment, or would you rather be in the room?
I go back and forth on this, right? I do like having multiple takes. I try not to do 400. I allow myself like 5, you know what I mean? And I do like that, but at the same time, I think I'm more dynamic in the room, right? Like you can get on a dating app. I always compare to dating, right? On a dating app, I'm a overweight, balding, middle-aged male, but in person, I'm much more dynamic, right? And I think auditions are the same way. But I do appreciate that I'm probably getting opportunities that I wouldn't obviously get if there weren't self-tapes, right? I'm an unknown quantity, so I'm probably getting more. So I appreciate it from that sense, but I do think I'm probably better in the room.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what's funny is I was listening to one of your episodes and I can't remember who it was. It was either a casting director or an agent who was claiming that they send like 15 selects to their directors and producers.
Yes. Oh, is that not true?
No.
Oh, yeah.
I was literally on the bus listening to it and I was like, what? It's like,
okay, because I always thought it was a lot less too, and this was a recent episode, and she told me it was that many, and then I had another casting person on, and they kind of confirmed it was at least 10.
wow.
This is
think
TV
it's like
shows,
7.
though.
7 is like the number for me, but it also depends if you have a regional casting director as well. If you're doing all the casting, I'm somewhere in the 7 to 10 range. But if you're doing 2 different areas, I think then we limit it because then that's a lot of people for the producer to look at.
I just can't imagine a producer sitting there watching 15 people. Like I don't know any of my producers who would sit there that long. Like I rarely send more than 5. And I was like, so when they said 15, I was like, what? I was like, and these producers are like not pissed off about it? Like that's crazy.
Yeah, she was saying they wanted them, and I think she was talking about a long-running show she had worked on, so maybe that is just the dynamic after a number of years. But I do find that fascinating. And when you guys send those off, do you give them just blank slate? Here's our 5, or do you say we really like this guy? Do you give notes on the 5?
I feel like everybody's different. For me, it depends on where I am in the relationship with my showrunner or producer, but most cases I will give them, these are our selects, but I will be very strategic of the placement of the actors because you need to give them something to compare it to. So the first one is like a strong tape, but maybe not my favorite. So 1 and 2 are usually good reads, but then 3 and 4 are typically my favorites. And then you sort of peter down from there.
Well, you don't tell them that. You just set it up that way.
Huh? Yeah. And but they basically, because they see like a good tape, but then they see the tape that is like very strong in my opinion comparatively. And then it's sort of like they're good, but they're not like gonna knock anybody out of the water because I think they need to have something to compare it to. Like these are, and it also depends, is it an ongoing search or is it an episodic thing that you have to, quickly churn these people out essentially? What about you, Jen?
Yeah. You know, it's funny. And I remember when we had Amanda Doyle on, she kind of said, she's like, we're really good at manipulating people, which again, she doesn't
Yeah.
like using that word. I love using that word because my very first boss taught me that. She was like, our job is to manipulate directors and producers into believing that these are the right people that we know are right. And then also making them think that it was their idea all along. And so like I learned very early on, it is a bit different with different people. Like, you know, some people, you know, that they'll only watch the first one, so you put your best first or whatnot. But the majority of the time, like we had Peter Lawson on earlier this season, and
Loved
I
that
work with
interview.
him.
That was my favorite episode you guys did.
Oh,
100%.
amazing.
He was
I
awesome.
honestly, he's
Right.
one of my favorite producers I work with across the board. He's just so easy. And so literally I would never send him more than 5. I don't think I would even maybe only send him 2 or 3 because we have just like an implicit trust between us. Cause he's like, well, I know you're sending me good people, but if it's with somebody like him where I have a really long standing relationship, I will literally write on there, this is my favorite. And most of the time, cause he trusts me. And so, but a lot of times I won't, or I'll put little notes of like, we really like this guy. He hit this beat wrong, but we know he can do it differently, just so you know. Like,
Yeah.
especially in the self tape era when we have history with people, I will tend to make a few more notes on people just because they don't have the personal relationships that we've had having people in the room prior to COVID. So, or even sometimes I'll be like, hey, I know this guy's not right, but I just want you to see him. So just like,
Yeah.
don't think I'm crazy.
Could be right for something else if
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to say manipulate. You're grooming these producers, and that's
Yes.
totally fine.
Much better word.
Better. Yeah. I
Okay,
will
wait. Let me.
say, oh, go
Oh, go ahead.
ahead.
I was
I was
gonna
just
say,
going this whole not being in the
is this
same
an
room is
improv
really
game?
challenging.
I
Go.
feel like I'm being tested. What happened? Okay, this has happened to me a number of times, and it's hard for me not to get discouraged. So I'd love your guys' take. I get pretty good auditions, right? They're small roles, but I get pretty good auditions. I've had 2 in the last year that were multiple roles, right? I'm just gonna say it. I auditioned for Barbie. I auditioned for the construction
Oh,
workers in Barbie. So it was
nice.
4 or 5. I did this again for How to Be a Bookie on HBO. It was 5 homeless people. All of these are one-line auditions. If I've ever had auditions or one-line scenes, right? If I've ever had an audition where I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get this, it's when I'm doing the math in my head and we go from 5,000 submissions down to 100 or 60 auditions. I don't know what the number is. Everyone's different. And then 5 of those 60, I'm like, oh, I gotta get it, right? They're gonna give one to a Nepo baby, one to a black person, one to a Hispanic, and then Mike, right? How many do you send over to producers for those? And or are you guys are they picking every single one of those or
No. I mean, oh, you mean like are the final choices? I
yeah,
think,
are
yeah,
you
they
sending
are.
twice as many if there's that many or
Not necessarily. I feel like we'll still send the same amount and then we'll sort of go through the waves. I mean, that's at least my experience. If they're like, okay, well, I'll pick, I've got 2 people out of this group. Okay, let's send us another wave of whatever it is. But I'm curious in terms of the material, are they combining dialogue or is it just like you do a line here, a line there, a line, like how is that structured for you?
Barbie was those cat calls, right? So they were cat calling her and it was 4 different lines like did you land from heaven? You're an angel. Fries with a shake. I think they had us do all 4 lines.
Mm.
But
Same for the
as
other
like
one.
one character or did you
I
have to sort of
I
diversify
think
the
I think I cut them. I think I cut
Mhm.
all 4.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've done that before where I'll be like, hey, these are two or 3 small roles. Just read for all of them because you're right for all of them.
Yeah.
And for us, it seems, again, hopefully this isn't going against what SAG's fighting for right now. But to me, it's like, that's easier for you to do that in one go because it's all for the same project, same vibe. You kind of get in that mode and you can just like lay those down really quick instead of us coming back to you. You do one and we know the producer can come back and be like, well, why does he read for that one? And then we have to go back again. And it's like, well, sometimes
Yeah.
just send them all and see which one you hit right, you know?
Yeah. I also think like when you are auditioning for sort of the under 5s or whatever the day players are for that particular show or whatever it is, I think being very sort of neutral in how you're dressed is important, at least like in sort of professional versus casual, however that's structured, because I mean, when we are back in the old days, when I was working on Super 8, when we would have actors audition for supporting roles that are like a line here, a line there, whatever it was, we would literally grab the headshots and put them on cork boards and be like, okay, so where does this person fit aesthetically? Can you see them here? So when you get really specific with your attire, especially sort of in the virtual space, I think you end up boxing yourself a little bit in, so that maybe the creatives can't see you in a different space. So I think it's like, if you are as neutral as possible, but still in the sort of either it's professional or a non-professional role, you sort of expand your opportunities, because they're like, oh, clearly he can act. Well, let's put him over here, even though he didn't audition for this.
Interesting. Okay. So how do I not get discouraged? How do I not get discouraged?
I don't think is that supposed to be discouraging? I think that's good. Like
back to my original question. If you got 5 opportunities to book this one thing, it seems like this is now the chance to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the hard thing for you, though, to be really honest, is being a white man in your age group and you're going up for 5 roles that you know most likely 4 of those, or 3 at least, maybe 4 are
Sure.
going to be diverse of some respect. You're really fighting for 1.
Right.
If that makes sense.
True. Yeah, that's fair. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you still have your options. I mean, it is nice to have that kind of option. Again, this is where I've said it before. I never, ever, am jealous of actors in the constant rejection, because like it's like I don't get one job and I'm like, well, but my lists were really good and like I know that meeting went well, and so I don't have that ability, even though I preach it to actors all the time of like, you just gotta let it go. And I mean, I say it all the time, but then I don't think it's partly, there's many reasons why I'm not an actor, but that's part, I just don't think I could handle it. I don't know. I give you guys props for being able to like constantly pull yourself up and be like, not for me, moving on, like just keeping that momentum going in your own head.
Yeah, for me it's just like you talked about, sort of organizing them for the producer so that you kind of get your point across of what you think is the best. But to me it's like, if I know these casting directors, and I don't know if they do, but if they like me, right? Great. So I've made it past this one thing. But then I'm like, great. Okay, so I made it past the first level. Now they're sending 5, 10, 15, whatever to producers. I'm like, okay, that's a lottery now, and I'm just a ball in a thing spinning, right? And it's just so like, okay, I got an agent. Okay, great. Now I'm getting auditions. Great. Now I got the casting director on my side. Great. And now I'm to this point where I'm just a lottery ball. It's like, what? How? How do I get through that one?
It's a lottery ball. I think that's not a healthy way to look at it. I think that's where the relationships with the casting offices really matter, because I think that's, when we know you as a person and know that you're reliable and that you're professional and all of those sort of like the basic work aspects of it, and then knowing your history. I think that's why I say like it's a long-term relationship, because we all have to get to know you in order to like feel good about putting you on set, whether it's like a co-star or a recurring or just a regular guest star. Those are things that is like building trust within the 2 relationships. So I don't think it's a lottery, because if somebody is auditioning, I understand the comparison, but if someone is auditioning for me and they've auditioned a number of times, like they auditioned and I'm gonna say, oh, they did a great job. I have other auditions that like, and also this may be something that SAG puts a stop to, but I think, we always have that database of material that we are collecting in terms of auditions. And I think it's something that it's not a disservice to actors. It's something that supports them in their body of work. If you have delivered great auditions, and I had this, there's an actor, oh God, I'm forgetting his last name right now. Ross. He goes by Francis, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, there's this great guy who gave this incredible self-tape, a petition to self-tape for Star Wars. Like it was the funniest thing I have ever seen. And we ended up bringing him in to tape, even though he wasn't right. And we told him that he wasn't right, but it was his dream to audition for Star Wars. And so we brought him in. He didn't get the part, but then I showed that petition video to other producers that I was working with years later, and it booked him a series job on, on a project. And I showed it to them, and the minute he came in to audition for them in like producer session, they were already fans of his. So I think it's like these different things that help us do our job, because we are laying the groundwork for you, because you're doing it for us.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I'm being a little I'm using hyperbole with the lottery thing, but it does,
Yeah.
and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm just completely misguided on this, but it does seem like the producers are more of a whim than you guys, right? You do all this work and but they're kind of like, oh, he reminds me of my ex-boyfriend. No, let's not, but also he reminds me of his ex-boyfriend. Oh, let's get, you know what I mean? It feels
Yeah.
more whimmy from them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. They do tend to be a bit more picky, especially like, again, I think I've said this on the podcast before. Like, I had a director who was obsessed with hair color, and I was like, and it was females. And I was like, you know how many women change their hair color every day? Like, it's not a bit. And I kept saying, and she's like, but I want it to be natural. And then I was like, but half the people that she was nixing, that color wasn't their natural color. And so, but she was like convinced of this. And it took us like a month for us to like get her around, because she just would like nix people, and like, we're like, but they're really good actors based purely on hair color. And because I really think at one point she's like, we just have too many brunettes. And I'm like, what? Like, oh God. Like, how do you fight that as a casting director sometimes, because it's so illogical? And and
I mean,
said,
now they have technology to do that. You get yourself the face app and you change their color and you say, like, make it look good.
I just can't wait for the next year's Oscars where it's the best blonde category.
Yeah.
Exactly. Blonde really made the film just because of her hair color. But I do think there is something, and that's where I kind of go back to the whole manipulation / grooming situation, where like, if we can manipulate the situation for the actors, we always will, because we know, I think that's the one great thing about our job, is we know at the end of the day, our choices are right and they're good. They may not always get it, because you might have a producer who's like hell-bent on casting a Nepo baby or something, or an influencer in some small role to get them a hit or something like that. But the majority of the time, the good directors and producers will take into consideration what we say. And so even if it came down to like you and one other guy for one of those roles, and we go to them and we're like, but we really like Mike. And they're like, yeah, but this other guy, just like, I saw him on Always Sunny a couple weeks ago and he just really killed it, and I want to go with him. At that point, we have to pick our battles. I always say, I'm like, who am I really willing to fight for? And, we have some great stories about that, but
it's social engineering. You guys it's smart, and you guys, that's why you guys are good at your job, right? You have to do that in order to make it happen. My question though, too, for you guys is like, I'm in so many catch-22. And by the way, for those that haven't listened to my podcast, if you listen to the first 300, I was much more positive and happy-go-lucky. Post-COVID, I feel like I'm much more negative and pessimistic, and I apologize, but whatever. We all have our moments. I'm in so many weird catch-22s, and I'm curious if you guys have a thought on any of these. So you can't get a TV credit until you have a TV credit. You can't get in SAG until you're in. You book SAG, right? And like, I'm SAG eligible, and I don't want to join, unfortunately, because I have so many non-union commercial auditions, and I book 3 to 4 non-union commercials every year, and it's like, so I just have all these catch-22s that I'm like, what if I flipped any of these? Would anything happen? Would it feel different or not? Do you guys have any thoughts on those?
I think as far as like your SAG eligible situation, I feel like the only instance that might help you is for multicam comedy, because multicam, they don't have the time to Taft-Hartley somebody. They move so fast that they will I will say 90% of the time they will only consider SAG actors, because the way that it works for us is, if we Taft-Hartley someone and for some reason they get denied, then the production gets fined. And because there's such a finite window for multicam, because they move so fast, they don't have the opportunity to risk that, essentially. So they will, most of the time, will only consider union actors. For the rest of us, I feel like, and Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, like I will Taft-Hartley actors up the wazoo if they will allow me. Like, I do it for indie film all the time. We do it for like the drama series, because we have enough lead time to make sure we're covered. But other than that, I don't know that I feel like when you have a job that is big enough to pay for those dues, that's the time to do it.
Yeah. I agree. I don't think, I mean, I don't think I would ever not see somebody because of it. Because I have, to be fair, I have a lot of friends who are in a very similar situation as you, and they keep coming to me. They're like, should I join? Should I join? Should I join? And I'm like, to me, I'm like, it's always a very personal decision, because as soon as you join, you do cut off a massive amount of like revenue stream as an
Massive.
actor. And
Unless you go
so,
FICOR.
what?
Unless you go FICOR.
Oh,
Because
yeah,
that's
yeah. Sorry.
different. You know,
Yeah,
the only
yeah.
thing that you can't do is vote as a FICOR member.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it's so hard because it's like part of me is like, and I've never, and Audrey talked about it a little bit, but it's like you have these like secret meetings and stuff in SAG that nobody else can be a part of. And so I'm like, I can't speak to those of like, you get to be a part of this like conversation. But like for me, I never want to tell somebody not to make money doing what they love. And that's where like I struggle sometimes with the unions, because I'm like, I support you. And again, we're a part of union and we get our benefits, and that's like really awesome. But also like, but I wish we had more support from them. Like, why do we pay all these dues and then they don't really help us get jobs? And, like, so you have some backup, but they not really a ton in Hollywood type thing. And so like, I get not wanting to join, because it is hard to cut that off. And it is a massive choice, like lifestyle change, in my opinion, where you have to really be committed. And I do think until you get that, like, something where it's going to pop off, like, you got that FX series and they're like, if you want to be on the show, you got to join. Then you're like, all right, I'm down. Like, and so I don't think it's necessary until you get to that point. And personally, SAG will probably hate me for saying that, but
I have a question for you though. For SAG eligible, do you get to participate in like the SAG Foundation and like those access? No, it's not nothing until you're joined.
Yeah.
Okay.
But to the TV credit one, like, let's say, okay, you have an under 5, right? And you have 2 ostensibly equal actors. One has TV credits, one doesn't. You guys might be pulling for the person that doesn't, right? I would think maybe because you guys want to find new talent. You guys live off of the blood of new talent type of thing. But if you send that to the producers, aren't they going to be more inclined to take the person that has the credits?
Not necessarily.
I would say half the time they don't even look.
Yeah.
Oh.
They don't even know.
Like, we try to send them demo reels and they don't even watch that shit. So
right. So doesn't that talk to my lottery ball analogy earlier though? Like, it's more of a whim, and you guys really have to social engineer that, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the social engineering, but also it's the performance at the end of the day. I think this goes back to like the conversation that we all end up having about, the fancy lights and the studio setting and all of that shit that people started doing in the last handful of years of going to studio spaces. Like, that, nobody cares about that ultimately. The bottom line is the performance. If you can't deliver, you can't deliver. And if you do, great. Like, we'll push for you, especially if we know you and we have, a sense of, if you don't have a body of work yet, but you have like a bunch of auditions you've given us over the years, we'll push. I mean, I think there was an actor that I had auditioned from the very beginning of working in casting in 2010 that I didn't get to cast her for 8 years, even though we had auditioned her for every single project that we had been casting. So it is timing. It is so many different things. It's collaboration. Like, this chick, she self-taped from Atlanta, and I was on the phone with her before she went back to do a retape of telling her what was missing and all of these things. And then she ended up booking like an 8-episode recurring arc on Bates Motel. So it's like, these things, it takes time. And I think that this idea that most people have when they come to LA or come to New York, that like, oh, it's going to happen within a year, I'm going to get an agent, I'm going to get a manager, like this glorification of Hollywood, because we only see the glitz and glamour of everything, is really a real disservice to actors.
I agree. We run-of-the-mill actors, there's so many of us, it's insane. It's insane.
Yes. Honestly, I think it's the biggest majority. I mean, you have like the actual fame and fortune actors are like such a small percentage of it that it doesn't make sense half the time when you listen to people talk about it.
I mean, you just look at the SAG statistics as they're on strike. You see those statistics and you see that 14% of the entire membership, I know it's like into the hundreds of thousands of members, only 14% of them can cross that threshold for insurance. That's how you know what is going on here.
Yeah, I've said this on the podcast too, but I'm going to make this intention clear to you both, is I enjoy this too much to give up. And if I have to be in the 70s-year-old white male category to start being that creepy old guy on every sitcom. You're going to see me on every sitcom in my 70s. It's going to be delightful.
By the time you hit 70, they'll do a remake of Three's Company and you'll be perfect for that, you know?
Well, I'm just under the assumption that there's going to be 10 actors left in their 70s, and I'll finally have the numbers that I can book everything.
Yeah, and it's just so hard because, like, I get that statistic from SAG, and I think I said this with Audrey, maybe I forgot to, but like, this is where I struggle a little bit with some of the SAG statistics that are being pumped at us every day, is that you can be in SAG and not be as committed to the craft. You can still be one of those people who's just here for fame and fortune and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, and that's the part that bothers me, because I'm like, you can be upset about not working, but when you're going up for so many roles against however many people, because so many people are being pumped into LA and New York just to be there to get their Instagram followers or to be on the cover of some magazine or date somebody famous, it's like, yeah, well, I mean, if SAG would maybe be a bit more like, how am I trying to say it? Like,
strict in terms of
Strict
joining?
with their participation.
And more like vet people a bit more. So it's not just to get in or whatever, because I think that's where some of those stats can be a bit overblown in this SAG strike situation. Because I'm like, if you had the people who are actually working towards their craft, not just sitting on their bum, waiting for waiting for, Baz Luhrmann to come calling or whatever, it's like, then you would have that. And I mean, I have friends who are very good actors who I've had this conversation with, who I'm like, well, you need to start working more. They'll come to me and be like, well, Jen, I haven't had an audition for like a year and a half. What should I do? Can you look at my materials? And I will always help them in whatever way I can. But I'm like, what are you actually doing to become a better actor? Because if you're not getting and generating this, you should be working towards becoming better. Just as if I'm going on meetings for being a casting director and I'm not getting the job, clearly I don't know enough actors in certain areas. And so I need to spend the next few months boning up on
Not
that.
necessarily true. That's not necessarily true. If you're not getting the job, it's not necessarily true that you're not qualified for it.
Well, I'm saying over and over and over again.
Oh, yes, over and over.
Yes,
but I think
that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying like if I just go in on one meeting and I'm like, oh gosh, I did something majorly wrong. No, but I'm saying like, because actors tend to say like, oh, I haven't worked in a year and a half, 2 years. I'm getting ready to lose my status or my health insurance or something. And that's when I'm like,
I think there's so many factors in that though, because it's like, as an actor, you can have really shitty representation that's not delivering you opportunities. And so you haven't had auditions because you don't have great representation. Or, if you're going on so many auditions and you're not getting the job, that's a different story. But I think, at certain levels, that goalpost is always moving. So at certain levels, when let's say you're in the transition from a co-star to guest star and you're getting all of the co-star auditions, but when you make that choice to say, I'm no longer auditioning for co-star roles, I'm going in for guest stars only, that amount of auditions will go down just by the nature of the job. And then the same thing happens when you go from guest star to series regular. The number of auditions, you have to be prepared for those things. So I think that it's a little bit of a mind fuck for an actor, because, and you, Mike, tell me if I'm wrong, but like, it's a mind fuck for an actor, because if you get so few opportunities, those opportunities become even more precious.
Yeah. I mean, you've been seeing me do the math over here. I'm talking about all the gates and everything. I get through one gate, there's another gate.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in a Keith Haring maze or something.
Also at the Broad.
Yeah. It's in my head.
Yeah. No, but I totally agree with you in terms of like making sure that you are prepared for the opportunities that you get, and to actively be part of that community who's always working towards your like bettering your craft and this idea. But I think like at the end of the day, SAG is also a business, and I don't know if like they may be a nonprofit business in the sense of like taking care of their members, but they need those dues. And CSA has done the same thing. They need those dues. So to a degree, I think they did restrict some of their qualifications, because before you used to be able to do web series and short films to qualify towards a SAG membership, and you can no longer do that. But however, I recently learned that music videos qualify or go towards qualifying hours if you're interested, Mike. Yeah. But I think so they have made some restrictions, but I do think, at the end of the day, they need those dues in order to continue to survive. That's all I have to say.
Like, that's a bigger conversation that I'm like, yeah, I don't think we're going to dive in there.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever cried after somebody's audition, like in a but no, in like a bad way?
Oh, no.
Like, why the fuck am I still
do you guys
here?
ever feel like for somebody's nerves on the other side? Like if somebody comes in as super nervous, do you guys ever like leave feeling bad?
I feel like we feel bad. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, I have actually a really good story about this because we're friends now to this day. And I won't call him out because I don't want to embarrass him. But
We're
there was a
friends,
kid.
Jen? That's so...
What?
I said we're already friends. That's so nice, but it was a bad joke.
The answer is yes.
Oh, yes, of course. There was this kid who came in, and I remember like I met him in a class or something, or I met him. He didn't take my class, but I had met him when I was at the studio, and he seemed cool and whatever. And he was like, he had emailed me after, and I was like, oh, I have like this small role. I'll bring him in and see how he does. And he was so nervous, and it was like a hot LA summer day. Came in just drenched in sweat. And I usually like to, as soon as when you're in person, I usually am always like, if you need a minute, like take a minute. I'm not in a rush. Like I always pad my audition days so that I know people can have time to do what they need. And so he came in and he just looked so distraught. And clearly, like, I think we just know at this point as casting directors, we're like, you're never going to get a good read that way. I mean, if you can really flip it on like that, you would be, the next, Brad Pitt. But so he comes in just like stressed out and he's like he was holding his sides because I don't care if actors hold sides. And it was just like his sides were just shaking. And I was like, seriously, do you want to go get some water? Like take a walk. Like it's like I can read a couple other people and then you can come back. It's not a big deal. And he's like, no, I'm going to do it, Jen. I'm going to do it. And it was so bad because he was so nervous that and it was one of those things where I'd given him so many opportunities to like regroup himself and he didn't want to take it. And at that point, I think some actors maybe do just think like, I know I'm not getting this. Let's get it over with and be done with it. But he left and I looked at the girl who was running my camera and I was like, oh boy, like I just feel for him. Like I was like, and I even said, I was like, was there anything else I could have done better to make him not that nervous? Cause like, I don't like we talked about this on the podcast, but like, I really hate being that casting director where people get scared of that. I'm like, I want to take that wall down and like people feel comfortable knowing like if they get an audition and it says Jen Presser on there, they're not like, it's like, oh, okay. Oh, that'll be easy. Whatever, she'll work with me. I want that aura around me when people see my name, whether they know me or not. And so when he left, I felt absolutely gutted for him. I just was like, that poor kid. And then I saw him like a year later back at the studio. And I told him, I said, how did you do that day? Did you go home and cry? Like, what happened? And he was like, Jen, that was one of the worst auditions I've ever done. And he's like, I've been scared to run into you since. And I was like, dude, I'll totally bring you in again. I was like, let's do it again some other time. And we're now friendly and we chat and stuff. And so.
Do you guys have that same pressure though? Like a lot of people on this side build it up and then they're like, oh, I fucked it up. Fuck. Oh, I'm so. Do you guys after like a tough session are like, oh, I messed this up. I picked the wrong people. I brought in the wrong on a different level. Do you guys do that as well?
I feel like it's more. I don't think it's beating ourselves up, but I think it's more of like, oh, that didn't like. We, especially sort of in the guest star series regular or like supporting lead situation, I think when somebody comes in and misses the mark, we know they can do better. And so it's sort of devastating. Or if someone we don't know and they're like, oh my God, they have the perfect look, but like, let's see what comes out of their mouth. I think, we really are hoping that it will work. And so when it doesn't work, it's a little bit devastating because they can deliver and for whatever reason they didn't. So if it's a matter of, giving it a second shot when somebody has a chance to go back home and sort of, I've had actors that will come in, they know like we've done several takes and we can't quite hit it for whatever reason. And we did the best that we could, but they'll go home and they'll self-tape and the agent will send it in being like, listen, he felt like he didn't hit the mark when he was in. Here's a self-tape that he feels a little bit more confident about. So, and then I'll send that in if it's up to par of what we're looking for. So I think it's, understanding to a degree that like what happens in the room is when we're in the room again one day, won't be the final you know, it doesn't have to be you came in and shit the bed and whatever was going on in your life at the moment at that day. I mean, I remember when we were doing Bates Motel, and it was literally the day after Trump was elected, and every woman who came in to audition could not put words together. And that had no bearing on what they were capable of as actors. It was just an environmental just disaster. So I think it's certain things that you just know as a human that it's not necessarily the performance that they're not capable of getting. It's just an environmental thing, and sometimes people need another day to process.
It's interesting. You guys are almost like parents, like, come on, son, you got this. It's so weird. We have the control and it's on us, but you guys are like, come on, deliver. It's really like a coach-parent type of relationship.
Yeah.
Weird.
I mean, we always say, we're always like, we want you to win. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions about casting directors. Like, actors sometimes think that we're the enemy, that we're this big gatekeeper. But the thing is like, it's a job at the end of the day. And the sooner we cast somebody, the sooner we're done. And then we get to like move on to the next thing. So it's like, we're not here to be like, you suck, Mike. Like, go sit in the corner. No. Like, I want you to win so that I can move on with my life.
Yeah. And that's why this podcast is great, you guys, because you're like showing that. And that's why like I've enjoyed my interviews with casting directors, because it humanizes the process a little bit more.
Yeah. Have you ever been too scared to ask a question to somebody?
On the podcast?
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty, if you listen to a lot of them, I'm pretty wide open. I'm just having a conversation. If I go into territory where they are uncomfortable, I say, you don't have to answer that, but I was curious and that's what came front of mind. So feel free to answer. I do think
you are a great interview person, by the way. You give a great interview.
Thank you. That's very nice. You can tell me some more if you want. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just curious, right? That's all. Like what you guys just described as far as how many you send to producers, every single person's different. Everybody's had a different experience. There's no right way. I like to compare it to sports, right? Sports, you just sort of get funneled out on the way up, right? If you're not going to play in college, you're not going to play in the NBA. Acting, casting, all this is so different. You can quit your day job at 60 and then just start acting when you're 60. And it just, there's no right way. So just gathering all this information, I think, only helps you to realize that there's no right way, and you're probably doing the way you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I think it also depends largely, especially on the kind of projects that we work on, how many people are involved. The more cooks in the kitchen, the more challenging it becomes. I remember my old boss, she was doing a CBS show, and there were literally like 27 executives or like executive producers chiming in on things. And how do people agree? It's casting by committee. Like, how do people agree? It is like a miracle that TV gets cast, period. That's all I have to say. It is, I don't know how it's done, but it is sort of godsend. I don't know.
To your question though, Jen, there was one person, if you guys want, you guys like the tea on this one. This is
we do. Love the tea.
I had a son of a famous actor on. He himself is an actor as well. This was many years ago. He was the most boring interview I've ever done to date. So painful, so slow, so uninteresting. I wanted to hang myself during the interview because it was so bad. I was like, okay, great, it's done. He sends me literally, no joke, and I'll tell you guys his name after, or you can bleep it out. He sends me an email, I don't know, a couple days later and says, I was too vulnerable and I was too open. I shared too much. Please don't post it. And I didn't post it, and I was like, good. It was a bad interview. I don't even want to post it. You stupid dummy. That was so bad.
I was literally getting ready to look through your list.
No, it never got up. His dad was like a fame. It's you can bleep it out. It's
oh my gosh, you just worked with him. Not a great person, to be honest.
Oh no.
I love that we agreed on that one. Keep the agreement in there. Keep the agreement that you do what you got to do, but that was pretty funny, right?
Yes. Listen, as long as the name is gone, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Oh. All right, Mike, we got one really, really important question for you to end this, wrap this sucker up, because it's been awesome.
I'm ready. Go ahead.
You're ready. Oh, you know the question. Okay.
So
If the world was ending tomorrow, what cocktail or drink would you cheers the end of the world to?
I like that you changed this question because a lot of people weren't saying cocktails, and mine is not a cocktail either. Mine is a beer. I'm a big beer head. I'm from Minnesota. There's a brewery in Minnesota called Surly. They have a beer called Furious, Surly Furious. It is the most delicious beer you've ever had in your life. It's an IPA. It's super piney. It's like a spruce tree in a can, and it is delicious. Surly Furious.
That.
Look it up. It's not available out here, but if people want to send me some, please do because I love it so much.
We'll link your address on our podcast. Yeah. Send free beer to Mike.
I just want to say that I'm officially halfway through this bottle, and this is the second time I've been tipsy on Tipsy Casting. So thank you, Mike, for creating an environment where that was safe.
I got you. I talk a lot. It's easier to drink when I'm doing all the talking, I feel like.
Yes.
Perfect.
Oh, man. Awesome. Thanks so much, Mike. It's been awesome having you, and I'm sure we'll chat and see you lots more. Hopefully I can meet you sometime when I'm in LA.
Yeah, next week, hopefully. Thank
you
so much for having me, you guys. I'm being dead serious when I say it's really cool to have somebody like me on who is grinding the way out, and a lot of people don't hear this, you know. And if you want to talk to my family back in Minnesota and tell them I am doing stuff, I would really appreciate it.
Only if you then tell my parents.
Same. Amazing. Well, cheers. Thank you so much. We're very excited to have you on. Cheers. If you love listening as much as we love sharing, click subscribe on our YouTube channel or find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thanks for listening.